Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning into my paper. I'm recording here from my hometown Groningen in the Netherlands, and this paper is part of a larger PhD project, for which I'm happy to report that I have received funding for next fall. This paper will give you a little taste of this project, focusing on two case studies, Welcome to Night Vale and Tanis. This paper consists of three parts. Firstly, I'll talk a little bit about paranoid podcasting in general, and then I will focus on Welcome to Night Vale and Tanis as my case studies. So let's go first into paranoid podcasting. So paranoia is more relevant than ever, with politicians such as Donald Trump openly flirting with conspiracy theories, or the rise of alt-right conspiracy QAnon. Considering its historical perspective, however, paranoia is not a recent phenomenon in the US. It is deeply rooted in American politics, as evidenced by Richard Hofstadter's 1966 seminal essay, The Paranoid Style in American Politics. For Hofstadter, the spokesperson of the paranoid style uses it politically to convey the sentiment that a hostile and conspiratorial world is directed specifically against a nation, a culture, or a way of life. Notably, the paranoid style has found a substantial cultural outlet in the fastest growing medium of our time, the podcast. A podcast is an audio-only, on-demand narrative form that draws millions of listeners both within the US and worldwide. The paranoid style is the most pronounced in fictional podcasts, as they create a lot of evocative formats in which it is used. My PhD project focuses on this intriguing conjunction of the paranoid style and fictional podcasts, and is especially interested in questions about these podcasts' creative and political potential. These podcasts build on an existing American tradition of the paranoid style and cultural objects. Aesthetically, these fictional podcasts share characteristics with, for example, the novels of Don DeLillo and Thomas Pynchon, as well as the 1930s radio drama, but they also have a few new features. For example, the consumption via headphones literally gives the listeners voices in their heads. This PhD project investigates how podcasts convey, both in form and content, a paranoid affect. Building on Lauren Berland's cruel optimism, I maintain that this affect is political, because it contains the collective responses to urgent crises of the present and makes assumptions about what forces are responsible. As Xian Nai suggests, a paranoid affect is often used to express a lack of individual subjects' agency in an era of systematic crisis. This paper focuses on how Tanis and Night Vale respond to two crises. Firstly, the monopoly of tech companies over our everyday communications, and secondly, the increasing US imperialism after 9/11. Tanis and Welcome to Night Vale use the paranoid style to imply corporate conspiracies, to criticize the increasing power of tech companies and how the US government agencies and large corporations exploit and weaponize new technologies such as big data and algorithms. However, the centrality of tech companies lays bare the tensions between their political commitment and their complicity. While in these podcasts, the potentially harmful technologies of tech companies drive much of the paranoia, podcasts rely on them for funding and dissemination, which also makes them complicit in some of the causes of paranoia. So moving on to the next chapter, Welcome to Night Vale, where every conspiracy is true. The show is described by its producers as a town where every conspiracy theory is true and people just go on with their lives. Welcome to Night Vale is a small imaginary American town in the middle of the desert where all kinds of unlikely events happen. Citizens are plagued with glow clouds that rain dead animals, or a war with a tiny civilization that lives under the pin retrieval era of Lane 5 in the local bowling alley. Night Vale community radio host Cecil Palmer narrates these events as if they are completely normal. Most of Night Vale's stories are centered around a menacing government agencies and evil corporations that conspire against the citizens of the town, keeping in place a totalitarian regime and extreme surveillance measures. In Night Vale, various government organizations conspire to keep in place an undemocratic and untransparent government organization that rules the town in a totalitarian fashion and uses extreme forms of surveillance. Fake yet menacing government agencies, the shared secret police, world government, and the city council are just some of the organizations that constantly watch Night Vale citizens. Furthermore, radio host Cecil often deals with government issues, corrections, censorship, and propaganda. But as promised, I will focus mainly on corporate conspiracies. So in Welcome to Night Vale, Night Vale's greatest opponent has been StrexCorp Synergist Incorporated. The single objective of StrexCorp is to buy and control everything, in which they succeed to the point that they own everything in the town and all of Night Vale citizens become StrexCorp employees. The corporation then controls all citizens' living conditions and frantically increases work hours to further push productivity.
And now the community calendar. Tuesday is work day. All StrexCorp-owned homes and businesses, which is to say all homes and businesses, should work all day in their most productive and enthusiastic way. Work is how we all become better people. You do want to become a better person, right? You want to be valued. You want to have value. You want your value, numerically speaking, to increase. Then work.
It also has a familiar ring to it. It perfectly reiterates the neoliberal ideology that we become valuable through our work and that work should give us fulfillment. Interestingly, while the citizens of Night Vale do tolerate their inept government, they do start a rebellion against StrexCorp. As Cecil, the host of the radio show, usually puts it, we may be controlled by the city council and the vague yet menacing government agency, and chemtrails, and a secret order of reptile kings, and the mysterious lights that hover above us. But we will not be controlled by a smiling god. And this smiling god refers to StrexCorp motto, which is believe in a smiling god. And a Reddit user suggested that it was not very hard to guess what that referred to. And made like the first image that you see here. So as such, Night Vale poses an effective critique of large corporations such as Amazon. But StrexCorp is not their only opponent. If StrexCorp is sort of the classic evil corporation or the Amazon, eGemini is the social media equivalent of it. eGemini is a tech startup Dreamfluencers company that wants to drink Night Vale's soul. To do that, eGemini sends out, quote, one of their corporate prize contestant sweepstakes buzz marketing street teams to dreamfluence anyone who stands in their way, unquote. When it appears that money gives eGemini the means to drink Night Vale's soul, Night Vale as a response abolishes money and moves to a love-based economy. However, eGemini finds a new way to make profit, putting love into an app and monetizing it. So the eGemini episodes show not only how problematic and predatory late-stage capitalism is, also its versatility and how it endlessly adapts to gain profits. So how does Night Vale transmit the paranoid style? Well, one particularly strong example is the episode Alright. Actually, Alright is quite strong because it starts with Jeffrey Craner's statement that the episode is best listened to via headphones, and it quickly becomes clear why. The moment the episode starts, the sound is only coming from the right side of the headphones. Cecil addresses this directly and says, I am reporting today only from your right ear. I need you to be able to hear the world around you, and this is vitally important for your continued survival. In the remainder of the episode, the sound switches sides a couple of times, and Cecil, who assumes that the listener is in a public place, encourages the listener to put a finger in the other ear, only to exclaim later, oh no, somebody saw you put your finger in your ear. That is so embarrassing. Night Vale also fully uses the possibility that audio affords. Listening, for example, to this segment and pay particular attention to the background noises.
Flynn. She won't be there, and thus could not possibly organize any community insurgency at all. She's a fugitive, wanted for destruction of StrexCorp property. And we wouldn't want her to show up and ruin our parade day by leading a helicopter rebellion against what she calls, her words, not mine, a dystopian corpocratic regime. Nope, I would never want to bring down the malevolent benevolent corporation that owns our station.
So, what is particularly interesting about this segment is that you may have noticed some strange peep while you were listening to this. This is no technological glitch. Actually, hidden in the background is Morse code that has the messages Tamika needs you, rise up Night Vale, go to Raiden Canyon, now. So these are just two examples of how Night Vale uses the medium to transmit paranoia in new ways. Tanis is somewhat different and revolves around podcaster and journalist Nick Silver, who becomes intrigued in the Tanis conspiracy. While Tanis is fictional, the show never says so and intriguingly supplements fictional elements with historically accurate references. Tanis, which remains undefined for most of the first season, seems to be some kind of spiritual, ancient power located somewhere in the Pacific Northwest that generates all kinds of weird events, disappearances, and erratic behavior. The two main antagonists are the two corporations. The first is the mysterious corporation Tesla Nova, which does research in the area where Tanis is. The work they do is top secret, and many of Tesla Nova's former employees disappear. The other corporation, Paranoia, is a shady organization with a lot of money that offers people extremely expensive ways to find Tanis, and is possibly responsible for multiple deaths. A lot of the research that moves the narrative forward is done by hacker Mirkabnip, or MK, and the importance of the internet for the show becomes once again quite clear if you listen to one example.
We want to believe, to stumble into something genuinely mysterious. I suppose that's why I fell in love with the Tanis myth right away. It just felt different, richer somehow. I don't know. I keep waiting for something to pull back the curtain, to explain away the enigma that is Tanis, but so far, the web of mystery just keeps getting deeper and more complicated. I'd become worried that the internet was draining all the mystery from the world, but after this week's story, I may have to rethink my position. Between the deep web bulletin boards, the Markovian parallax denigrate, and the elaborate strangeness of Reddit A858, the internet just became a whole lot more mysterious.
So here you listen to host Nick Silver, who is working on Tanis. And in this episode in particular, they were very interested in the role of the internet. But what is also quite interesting here is that the mystery that Nick talks about in this episode actually exists. So the Markovian parallax denigrate is an actually existing thing, which is quite interesting. At the same time, Tanis also makes reference to other paranoid culture. For example, when Cameron Ellis, the leader of Tesla Nova, surprises Nick and asks him to get into the car, he responds, "Really? But I've seen 3 Days of the Condor." And 3 Days of the Condor is a 1975 conspiracy film, one that Jameson actually insightfully analyzes in his geopolitical aesthetic. So indeed, throughout the show, Nick and MK are in constant danger. They are being followed, and Kay's laptop and apartment are compromised, and Nick is drugged, threatened, and almost kidnapped. Nevertheless, Nick becomes reluctantly complicit in the activities of these evil corporations. In Tanis, to investigate the mystery he has uncovered, Nick must join forces with the Tesla Nova Corporation, a potential source of much of the horror that he encounters. In terms of form, compared to Welcome to Night Vale, Tanis is clearly more horror-like. There is a very sort of harrowing passage about children with no eyes that wander through the forest. And horror in an audio-only medium does something very specific. When you're watching a movie or a television series, you can avert your eyes, or in a book you can skip over a passage. But audio really is inescapable. You cannot not listen. And where Night Vale uses humor to make it a little less intense, in Tanis you're really pulled into the story. Tanis also engages in transmedia storytelling. It posts show notes for each episode so that listeners can follow along and investigate. Furthermore, Nick encourages his episodes, or his listeners all the time, to keep looking at the end of each episode, which is a nice way of keeping listeners involved in the series, but also a good way of transmitting the paranoid affect. So, in conclusion, these podcasts have found interesting and exciting ways to transmit the paranoid style. Night Vale and Tanis show new and exciting ways to transmit it. And with the intimacy of the human voice, the use of headphones, when listening to podcasts, listeners already have voices in their head. But in playing with podcasting's affordances, Tanis and Night Vale show the versatility of the medium and how they can really sort of update the paranoid style for the internet age. The content of the shows illustrate a certain political commitment to exposing the harmful ways in which large corporations control the lives of the citizens. However, the protagonists, Cecil and Nick, are both complicit in the system and largely powerless in the face of these large corporations, which also taps into the paranoid affect they convey. Thank you very much for listening.